Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We've had an amazing conference so far, I'm sure you'd agree, but it's all been a warm-up act to today's panel, this panel. And the reason for that is, I'm not kidding, the reason for that is the four generals joining me are some of the most distinguished senior military commanders in the world, and we're very, very lucky to have them. Between them, they have a total of 14 stars. I'm going to introduce my panel. General Hyten was the 11th Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was the second most senior-most uniformed officer in the country, and previously commanded U.S. Strategic Command, which is responsible, amongst other things, for the nuclear deterrent, and commanded the Air Force Space Command. We have General Sir Gordon Messenger here from the UK, who is the Vice Chairman of Defence Staff of our country. He is now the Constable of the Tower of London. And for those of you who watch The Crown, he is responsible for the crown jewels. In fact, if you Google, you should do this, if you Google him and write crown jewels, you will see at the coronation of His Majesty the King, he was carrying the crown right there in front of him. We have General Cardone, who was commander of the Army's Cyber Command, and General Kral, who was Director of Command Control, Communications and Computers, and the CIO of the Joint Staff. And I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone when I say, generals, thank you for your service. Please join me in welcoming my panel. General Hyten, I'm going to start with you with an easy opener, if that's okay, which is, I'm going to make a statement, true or false. The world is in a global AI arms race. True or false?
True.
We hear about all sorts of issues in defense, aging platforms, not having enough bullets in guns, not having enough planes on carriers. Why should we care so much about AI and not fixing the basics first?
Well, I'll start with this. I'm 64 years old, and my maintenance costs are going out the roof. And I have no idea what's going to break next, but something's going to break. Here's an interesting statistic for you. The oldest aircraft we have flying operationally in the United States Air Force today is a B-52 that is 64 years old. But the scary part is the 58 B-52s we have flying today, the average age is 63. And how we keep those things flying is remarkable, because we do it on the backs of enlisted airmen that are working in the snowdrifts in Minot and the heat of Barksdale, Louisiana, somehow keeping those things flying. And somehow we look at AI as an additional cost on everything that we're going to be doing. So when Shell and Dow and Duke Energy were up here a minute ago, do you think they're doing that because it costs them money? They're doing it because it adds value or saves money. That's why they do it. So how about we give those maintainers that are maintaining the B-52s, how about we give them a tool that tells them what's going to break next? And how about we give them a tool that gives them the supply chain they need to get the equipment and materials they need? How about we give them a tool that gives them the supplies and the parts they need at the time they need it? We can do that today. The real question you should ask in an AI world where if we have competitors and they're doing AI and we're doing AI, there's a race. People don't like saying we don't have an arms race, but if we have adversaries, we're in a race. So we have to stay ahead. How about we give them those tools? The real question is, why doesn't everybody in the United States Air Force, and the United States Navy, and the Marine Corps have those tools today? Why do we keep beating on those enlisted folks that are maintaining the stuff every day? Give them the right tools, and then we will save enormous amounts of money at the same time, and that money can be plowed into things that we need to do more. So it's actually to add value and save money. That's why we need to do AI. It just frustrates me that it's not everywhere right now.
Talking about tools, General Kral, you are credited with having delivered CGJADC2. What in the world is that? How did it use AI? And why do you always use these complicated acronyms that no one can understand?
Well, in fact, we actually use acronyms within acronyms, which is a gift. It's certainly a skill. It's ethereal to some, but really, to boil this down simply, this idea of combined or joint all-domain command and control is about the integration of data so that we can fight. Data are the new realm, the coin of the realm that we live in right now. And it's very difficult when we think about whether we're in the phase of competition against great powers, which we are, or whether we're talking about armed conflict at any scale. The ability to move data through our systems so that we can act and decide in very little time is critical to the success of warfighting today. I might argue that this was an advantage 10 years ago. It's now a warfighting imperative that we have this to be successful. And we have gotten in our way more often than not in making those things happen by siloed systems, not looking at ways that we can share, but we are now more dependent than ever. I think Merrill's opening was really, it captured the challenge. We're awash in data. We're awash in sensors. And the romantic idea of a battlefield photograph or even a few snippets of full motion video is nothing compared to analyzing things like the electromagnetic spectrum. In all of our post-mortem results that we go back and look at an event that's happened, at least in the last 10 or 15 years, we have more often than not found out that we had the information that we should have been able to dissect and consider, but we couldn't do it in near real time or real time. That's unforgivable, and it's also unnecessary today. And so AI sits at the heart of what we call this idea that precedes action, but it's making sense. We can sense more than we've ever had before. Making sense of that data is where AI comes into that equation, especially at speed, so that we can ultimately act.
Thank you. General Cardone, specifically on intelligence, the way we collect intelligence is completely transformed over the last few years. There's so many more open source capabilities out there. How will this fit with emerging communications infrastructure, particularly in contested environments?
Right, so building on what General Kroll talked about, what's really changed is availability of open source information, and you see that like crazy, what's going on in the Ukraine, right? And this is from space assets, electromagnetic spectrum, organizations such as Planet and Premise, et cetera. But when you think about a contested environment, there have been great discussions in here. The problem is the transport layer. The transport layer isn't always there, so you can't have this continuous stream of information. So when you start thinking about how you have to process information, I think about it in terms of volume, veracity, and velocity. When you start thinking about large language models, when you're a soldier or an airman and you need very specific information, if you could have a series of questions that's collection, a big pile over here, and when you get the communication, only the information you need comes down out of that pile, that would be great. We don't have that. Right now, it sort of is first information in, out, information gets connected, it gets stacked up in buffers, and it comes down, and much of that information is not going to work. So this CJAD C2 is fantastic to get after this really hard problem, which I also believe is an AI problem.
General Messenger, outside of the US, there's a certain US president, I won't name him, but it rhymes with Grump, who has said over and over again that NATO partners aren't carrying their weight, not investing enough, etc. Is this an opportunity for Europe to lead in AI, or will we end up following the US once again?
So I think it is currently inevitable that if you're looking for scale and you're looking for enterprise-wide applications, I think you're looking at the US. But that shouldn't underplay the world-class AI work that is going on now in Europe. And it certainly shouldn't underplay the need for those two communities to talk about common protocols, common technologies, because the power of collaborations and the power of coalitions we know is always going to have an advantage over unipolar adversaries. So I think there's a scale differential, but I think in terms of Europe's ability to deliver generally, world-changing technologies, that certainly exists.
And how do we make sure we're interoperable with our allies, where everyone is using different systems?
Yeah, in my experience, interoperability is very rarely a technical issue. It's much more often a policy issue or a cultural issue, and I think those are the issues that need to be overcome to improve interoperability. Telling tales out of school, when I was the vice chief, and this precedes the 2019 contract with the US Air Force, myself and my then American counterpart, Paul Selva, tried to tackle the issue of predictive maintenance on our C-130 fleet, a common aircraft in both nations. And we didn't get beyond our ability to share data. And this is two of the closest allies the world has seen in the military domain, and we weren't able to effectively share data because of policies and protocols. So that's certainly where I would start, rather than necessarily fixating on the technical challenges, which can almost always be overcome.
And one thing, real quick, I mean, it's stunning to realize that when the F-35 was first delivered, our frontline fighter, it couldn't even talk to our own F-22. So this is not just a UK-US thing. We have the policies and protocols inside our own country that keep that data from getting to the right place. When I was the vice chairman, working with General Kroll, we developed requirements documents, and the fundamental piece of all those requirements documents was a statement that said, from this day forward, all data will be made available, period. That's the key to all of this in the military. That's actually the key to your enterprises. If you can't make the data available, you can't take advantage of what AI is. So working through those things that Sir Gordon was talking about is critical.
Sir Gordon, you mentioned Ukraine. This is the first time that cheap drones have been used at scale in battle. How does that change the pace of acceleration of AI? I saw that the US Army gave up on its Scout helicopter program after spending a couple of $1 billion on it to focus on cheap drones. Has Ukraine changed the way we think about drones and AI?
Yes. So if you're not tracking, it's widely reported that Ukraine's losing about 10,000 drones a month. And when you think about that, that's rather stunning. The way I look at drones, it's precision could be precision mass when enabled with autonomy and artificial intelligence. So yes, I think it's one of the fundamental changes, I think, especially for frontline soldiers. If you can imagine a drone swarm coming in with 1,000 drones, you can't shoot them fast enough. So there is a real problem here in counter unmanned aerial vehicles as well. The other thing that's starting to happen, though, in this space is we're very focused on the air drones, but there's just as much work going on in sea and land, and also now multimodal comes out of the sea and becomes air. And you can see this with the sea drones that the Ukrainians have used, what's going on with the Houthis there in the Red Sea. So there's plenty of wars going on right now where you can see glimpses of the future of war. This is clearly one of them, and AI and autonomy are both going to be critical in this space.
Do you think we'll see all sorts of new suppliers? I mean, did you ever imagine that Iranian drones would be sold to the Russians?
No, but I guess increasingly not much surprises me anymore, and it's more important that we be ready for it.
General Hayden, Microsoft recently reported that hackers from Russia, Iran, China, North Korea were using their AI tools. How worried are you about that?
I hope nobody's surprised that Russia, China, and North Korea are using AI. They're aggressively pursuing AI. You asked the first question, are we having an arms race? That's what the arms race is about. But I hope you're also not surprised to know that Russia, China, and North Korea have been using false information on social media to sow discontent in this country on a regular basis all the time. A significant percentage of everything you see about a presidential candidate on social media comes from Russia, China, and North Korea. It is disinformation. AI is a tool to empower that, but we have to have the ability to identify and counter the product of that information. AI is just a tool that will generate that. So we don't want to get enamored with AI as the problem. The problem is the adversary behavior. That is what has to be countered, ideally deterred, and prevented.
Do you think? General Messenger, could you tell us about the AUKUS partnership and what that might mean for AI development and the specific threats of the Indo-Pacific?
Certainly. I hope AUKUS is known to everyone. It's certainly had a good profile. I think the importance of it absolutely matches that profile. There's two parts to it. The best known part is the support that the US and the UK are giving to Australia to deliver a nuclear-powered submarine with all the associated issues. There's a second pillar, which is less mature but just gaining pace now, which is very much about technological collaboration in the cyber, the AI, the sensor, the stealth technologies. And I think that's potentially huge. And I think it would be wrong to just allow governments to get on with that. I think there's a very, very strong defense and intelligence industrial base element to that. And I think the success of that particular coalition, more than any other that I know, will be dependent on effective working between governments and the defense industrial base. You talk about China, and I think that raises a really important issue of deterrence and where AI fits in deterrence. And in any arms race with any technology such as AI, deterrence should and must play a part. And of course, we've got used to viewing deterrence through the lens of ownership of a capability that dissuades a potential opponent from doing something. And of course, I don't think it is like that now because of the fast pace of change in the AI world. I have absolutely no doubt that the possession of AI capability is a really important deterrent effect. But we don't yet know what capabilities are going to have that effect, and therefore the deterrent quality that a nation and a group of nations needs in order to display deterrence is the ability to innovate and generate new technologies and new capabilities quickly. They may not know what those capabilities are yet, but having that ecosystem and that relationship between government and defense is a really important part of the West's deterrent posture, which we shouldn't ignore.
General Krall, talking about quick capabilities, defense procurement is often criticized as being slow. The same folks buying submarines or the same folks buying AI software, etc. But isn't it the case, and that we've seen this today as well with the US Air Force presentation, that defense has actually been pretty good in moving fast, in being an early adopter? Do you see procurement changing in defense?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I am incredibly impatient. So everything is slow to me. But what I would say is, while I believe that we are making improvements and we're understanding the need to experiment and iterate rather than build the perfect thing. In our digital age, it's not quite the same as the deliberate actions we would take, for example, to build an aircraft carrier. Yet our systems for funding look very similar, very deliberate, each step with tremendous tales of reporting that goes with it. And if you try to take that digital footprint and modernize with that type of apparatus, you end up receiving things at a time you don't want them. It's too late. So I will say that habitually, both the way that we've gone in development and the way that we're funded through a 5-year cycle hasn't necessarily been helpful to us. But what I have appreciated is the department's recent move to speed up at least portions of this without giving up the critical need for oversight. To be fair, some of the rules that we have on top of us are the result of bad behavior. That's why they're there, and we have civilian oversight and leadership with Congress. But there is a way that we're looking at now, which I'm extremely optimistic. From some of our defense initiative, the rapid experimentation fund that has been set up to move ideas into action very quickly is very promising. And I think it's starting to trend.
I'd like to move to the subject of ethics in defense, in AI. The public gets very worried, policymakers get very worried about the use of AI in defense. And people like myself who would look like a perfect target for a weapon system identified by AI also get very worried. It's the truth. General Hyten, are you concerned with ethics in the implementation of AI across defense?
So I think it's only natural to have a concern. But to me, the concern is misunderstood and overstated in so many ways. And here's why. So if you think about what we have to do as a military, a significant amount of what we have to do as a military is basically running one of the largest businesses in the world in the United States Department of Defense. And in order to do that, we need to be efficient in our operations. And so we need to take advantage of all technologies right today to be efficient in our operations, because most of the money we goes to is for our people, for our systems, for our bases, for our infrastructure, all those pieces. And there's no moral, ethical issues about taking advantage of technology to do that. Now, on the application of military power, which is what we're all trained to do, which comes down to the possible taking of human life, you have to be very concerned about it. But we actually addressed this issue in 1949. The White House just published an executive order on AI. It's 82 pages long. It's actually not that bad. It's actually fairly enabling. I'm more concerned with the EU policy because it seems to be pulling things back and slowing things down. We should be accelerating in every case now. But in 1949, the Geneva Accords were signed in Switzerland by all the nations of the world, all the militaries of the world. And in that was how you deal with prisoners of war because of the experience in World War II. But because of the nuclear experience in World War II, there was also a very specific description of the law of armed conflict. And in the law of armed conflict, it clearly said that the use of military force has to be of military necessity, in other words, against a military target, not a civilian target. It has to be distinctive, which means you have to be able to discriminate between a civilian and a military target, and it has to be appropriate for the purpose. It's all written down. And we're trained from the time we're lieutenants, and I assume Sir Gordon was too, that if you violate the law of armed conflict, doesn't matter whether you received an order that told you to do it or not, if you violate the law, you can go to prison. That was William Calley and My Lai in Vietnam across the board. So it doesn't matter what weapon system you use, how it's powered, if it's used as AI or not. There is somebody behind the curtain that is using that capability that is responsible for the employment of force. And they will be held accountable by the law of armed conflict for whatever they do. We should just translate that into this, make sure that we understand what that is, and move forward, and don't get wrapped around 82 pages of concerns.
So you think the law is fit for purpose right now, even though the UK and the US don't agree on the definition of an autonomous weapon system?
So I talked about it last year. March of last year, the United States went to The Hague and presented a military proposal for the use of artificial intelligence on the battlefield. It's actually pretty good, because what it does is it takes the law of armed conflict, turns it into like 14 principles, and says we should all agree with this. China agreed with it. We should all agree with that, and then we need to follow up. But you also have to be worried, because if you watch Russia and Ukraine right now, they are not paying attention to the law of armed conflict. Even though they're party to the Geneva Convention, they are not paying attention to that. And I'm concerned that China would be the same way. But nonetheless, we are a moral and ethical people. Our allies in the United States fight with a set of moral and ethics. It sounds strange in war, but we have all been in that environment. We've all been to war, and we pay attention. And it's horrible when a civilian dies in an operation you're involved in. And I'd be surprised if every one of the four of us haven't experienced that, because it weighs on you for the rest of your life, because you're trained not to do that. That's one of the things that makes us different. But when we go to war, we need to use every capability we have to win as fast as we can with as as little damage as we can without impacting the civilian culture. That's what we live by. But we don't have to get wrapped around this mystery because, heck, we have the same law for nuclear weapons. It should apply to AI and everything else we do.
General Cardone, the DoD Chief AI Officer, the new one, has joined from the ride-sharing platform Lyft. Probably given up a big pay package and joined defense because he wants to serve. Do you think you can recruit enough high-quality folks into defense, giving up their jobs in tech companies, beanbags, granola dispensers, afternoon naps, to come and serve? Are you able to do that?
Well, the department struggles hiring. I'll just go back on my cyber experience. High-end cyber operators are very hard to, first off, hire and then retain. And we often depend on the private sector. And so in some ways, it's the way that the private sector and Department of Defense works together is going to give us the talent needed to deliver these capabilities. I don't think this is going to be a pure defense thing where we're going to create our own. Why wouldn't we leverage the talent of everyone in this room to help with the national security of the United States?
General Crowell, we hear about biases in data. And just like you were mentioning, General, using the skill sets of lots of people, the Department of Defense also launched an AI bias bounty exercise to crowdsource issues in data. Is this what it's going to come down to? We're going to crowdsource issues in data?
Well, I would say, first of all, some of the most biased people that I know claim that they have no bias. That is one of the blind spots of bias. So defining bias and making sure we know what we're talking about is the most critical step. But assuming we could look at this in an objective way, it's only one tool that's used. There's already in action in the AI and data world, data sampling. There's contextual analysis, algorithmic analysis that all serves to weed out bias. So that if it's defined properly, and there is not a one-time, one-off way to do it, but this is a constant part of the actions that go into a reliable data set, then I think this idea of crowdsourcing or bug bounty hunting, very similar, it's akin to what we do in cybersecurity, has its place. Maybe not as ubiquitous as you've opened with, but it has its place to work. The challenge is the data sets that we offer are not open to the public. And in many of those cases, these individuals have to be curated specifically to go in and put the human element on what the machine would do for us to see what's right and wrong. So I'm not afraid of it, but I certainly wouldn't claim that that's how I would build confidence alone in my data set.
I think we have to be really careful here on bias because the world in general has bias in it, and we have to learn how to operate with that bias rather than try to eliminate the bias out of the data set, which then when you put these models against the real world, they're going to make it worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the other thing is that a lot of the Department of Defense right now is focused on AI in the administrative systems of the department, not necessarily focused on AI for them. In the machines that we operate, the machines are the machines. They have no bias. But the administrative process we use has lots of bias. It's going to be more challenging implementing AI in the administrative. I mean, in my personnel records, you can go back and look when I was a young officer, I was an engineer. I was a third-class citizen in the Air Force, and because I was an engineer, the biases are all the way through that because some of the reports are written by pilots, right? So I'm not a pilot, so, that bias is there. Even though all the words are good, you can see a bias when you read that just because of the structure. That's hard to actually use, but the machine, the B-52 is a machine. That data is the data. There should be no restrictions on using that stuff right now, but we're kind of backwards in the department about how we're looking at it. The fact that they would ask that question says their focus is on admin, not on ops.
You, General Hayden, have worked a lot with politicians. And like politicians in the UK, do you think your politicians in the US are ready to understand and deal with AI? Or do they get it? Will they regulate properly? Are they as good as our side?
So I haven't been to the House of Lords, so I had no idea the House of Lords was that informed. But I can tell you that our politicians are not fully informed. But you shouldn't say that as a big concern. Most of the country is not fully informed, and our politicians represent our country. This technology is going unbelievably fast. We rolled out generative AI last year at this conference. This year we're rolling out C3 AI Vision. I mean, the speed of change, and if you're sitting in the White House every day, or you're sitting in the Congress, how do you expect to keep up and trust this new technology that's showing up? So one of the things we encourage people to do is try a pilot so you can understand it. Start small so you can understand what it is, and that's the difficult thing to do with a politician. What can we do to show them that it's real, it exists, it works, it's trustworthy? That is a hard issue to do it. So I don't necessarily blame the politician, but there's a huge education problem that companies like C3, the Department of Defense, and others have to do in order to explain what we're doing, just like we do with every emerging technology. This one's just moving unbelievably fast.
General Messenger, I served on the AI and Weapons Systems Committee, which you're familiar with. How far are we from seeing fully autonomous weapons systems with AI capability, killer robots?
Well, it's all very technically feasible, but I think we're talking here about the ethics of that. And I'm 100% behind John that the debate can be oversimplistic. I think the phrase human in the loop is the one you hear a great deal. I think we have to continue to unpack that as technology develops and adversary capability grows. And I think ultimately we'll be falling back on principles and judgments that we, as John said, have lived by throughout our entire careers. I think that it is utterly feasible that being rigid about a human in the kill chain and interpret in the way that it has been interpreted hitherto could be to a battlefield disadvantage if we continue to view it through that lens. So I think it's a very difficult area. The only people who are wrong about it are, I think, the people who feel that we are where we are, we've got a fixed moral and ethical position on this, which is immutable. I think it's something that we have to iterate and think about with lawyers and with policymakers to keep abreast of the opponent's ability.
But we say this, we have this moral and ethical position, we're not going to do it, but tomorrow if we see our adversaries deploying at scale, this sort of stuff, won't that go out the window?
Yeah. I mean, we already have weapon systems that automatically slave to threats. A lot of our anti-ship defenses are automatic and can do that. So this is not entirely new business, but in order to take that onto an offensive footing, I think requires a lot of thought as to where the human sits in that decision-making chain.
But it's interesting because there's actually an AI solution to deal with the AI employment problem. And the AI solution is, well, in order to employ AI in a complicated environment, you actually have to understand the environment to exquisite characteristics. You have to understand where the enemy is, where the civilians are, where innocents are, what the entire physical structure is, and you have to be 100% confident. And if you're 100% confident of where the adversary is, then I would be willing to, as a commander, to employ an artificial intelligence system to do that. But if I can't get to that 100% confidence, I won't employ it because I'll risk crossing that line that I don't want to. So how does AI help that? We have this mountain of data about where everybody is, who they are, what they do, the physical environment, the weather, everything. We need to take that and integrate it into that picture, give that picture to a commander so he can understand and make those right decisions about when and where to employ such a capability. So it can actually help that piece, and there's actually no ethical problem of integrating all the intelligence information on a battlefield.
I think the point that was raised about our employment of these technologies at the tactical level today is a consideration we should not overlook. We talk about hypersonics that come at wave-top levels where you have milliseconds to act. The human in the loop actually sets the conditions that are described to make sure that we don't create fratricide or any damage to the unintended targets. But these systems are not effective if once programmed, they can operate autonomously, and they do it all the time, primarily in our navies.
How do you feel about the fact that adversaries are recruiting NATO-trained personnel to come and work on their technology projects, and that's been happening at scale now? General Hyten, how do you feel about that?
So what you just described is treason. Treasonous behavior is already against the law. Now, there's the middle ground. I think that's what you're really getting at. The middle ground is retired or former United States or UK or allied military officers going into different countries in the Middle East, different countries in Southwest Asia, and providing that military advice and partnership is going through that. I personally think we need to be doing that because we're in a competition. We're in a competition with two significant adversaries, Russia and China, and when we're not there, the adversary is there. I would prefer that we be there, and in many cases, the United States military on active duty can't provide that advice for a lot of political reasons. So I would prefer that we engage that, but engaging with our adversaries, NATO-trained officers engaging with adversaries, to me, that's treason, and that should be punished and dealt with as, I'd run them up on the flagpole and let everybody see them. I didn't see that one coming.
Before we wind, any pressing things you'd like to communicate before our winding remarks? Yes.
Just on the ethical issue, I think we've talked about lethal force. I think there are also ethical issues involved in the information domain, and particularly the use of misinformation. And I think it's important there to differentiate between non-public and public information. I think in the non-public domain, misinformation and deception has been a key part of warfare for centuries, and artificial intelligence gives a really interesting capability if it can be used effectively, and I think it should be and could be. I think it's a very different thing if you start to counter public misinformation that is out there, whether it be state-based or non-state-based. I'm of the view that, I don't know, not everyone, but that we have a moral high ground, and I think it's really important that we retain that moral high ground in terms of public-facing information, and that even if we feel we're being disadvantaged by being unable to counter the misinformation, I still think retaining that moral and ethical position is more important than any sort of tactical advantage that might be accrued by an opponent in that arena.
Final thoughts. Don't hold them in. This is the moment to spill them out. Final thoughts.
On the part about use of autonomous weapons, at the end of the day, someone turned it on. They're responsible for what happens. And I had a conversation earlier with General Hyten about commanders being responsible and accepting the risk, and that's the way I view it.
I would only say that despite the fact that the US and the UK do not share a common language, you did a fantastic job in your moderation.
Yeah. And I'll just say above average. Very nice.
Thank you. Just in the last minute we have, we're going to do a rapid fire round, and not in the military sense of rapid fire. Maybe I'm going to ask you a quick question, and whatever the first thing that comes to your mind, just tell me what it is. General Messenger, AI in defense, will it make the world a better place or not?
It'll make it a more efficient place. I think there is a debate as to whether the AI that will be used to make things better, the degree to which it'll be countermanded by AI's ability to make things worse. And I don't know where that's going to play out.
General Hyten, excited or worried?
Well, I'm excited. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't excited. I mean, I hope you realize what you're seeing is amazing. And it's amazing for what it does, but it's also amazing because it protects the data. I don't think people fully understand that the data is your data. The data is the Department of Defense data, the Air Force data, the Marines data. It is protected. You know, the LLM doesn't influence your data. You don't get hallucinations. You don't get, it is the right answer. And so I'm really excited, and I think we're going to get there, but it's a race. We have to win this race.
General Crowell, happy or unhappy?
Always happy.
And General Cardone, will we be safer at the end of the day or not?
We'll be safer, but it'll be more lethal.
On that note, folks, please join me in thanking my very distinguished panel.